truth. But fear is a great teacher for people. Many people are motivated through fear. I don't want this to happen, so I will take steps necessary to make sure it doesn't. There's another way to live outside of that, and that is to say, I love doing the things that I love to do, and I'm going to ensure that I get to do more of what I love. And we have to be careful with these ideas too, because as Ram Dass said, and many of the Buddhist teachers, we don't want to move from there's a line of polarity that exists as one line: aversion, what I don't want to have happen, and clinginess, clinging to the thing that I love, right? I need more of this experience. I had 2 glasses of wine. It felt great. Let's see what a bottle feels like. It's wearing off. Where's my second bottle, right? We see this in all aspects of life. That movie was awesome, so I'm going to scroll through Netflix and watch a ton of crappy television just to find something that can addict me further. Any of that clinging to the experience is on the exact same line of polarity as aversion. I don't want this to happen. We have to explore those avenues to find our center space. And those are the extremes that we look at. You know, alcoholics talk about hitting rock bottom and bouncing back up. In many different aspects, we can learn through the pain teacher, which can happen on either side of this line, right? If I am aggressively seeking something and clinging to something that makes me feel good, I will experience pain there as well. If I'm constantly in fear of the thing I don't want, I will experience pain there as well. So the pain teacher works uniformly across this line. Eventually, we can come to a place where we quiet our minds and we're able to hear the whispers. And when we can hear the whispers, our guidance is there at every turn. And it doesn't need to become from the rational thinking mind where you've thought of every possible outcome, which is impossible. It comes from the deep inner knowing, the trust that you're being guided on track and that you're doing the right thing. And that has a feeling, a resonance feeling through the body when you're doing something that makes sense to you, when your heart and your head are in the same position as you move forward in life.
I like how clear you are. At what point in your life did it click? Was it you getting hit in the head like me? Because I never got taught this as a kid. My parents, we grew up, less than a mile away from each other. And we grew up in the middle of Cupertino, California, home of Apple computers, Tech Valley. Silicon Valley. It's like, there's so much there, but I find that with this today, there's so much connection, but there's so much disconnection.
You held up your cell phone if you're just for the audio listeners.
Yes, thank you very much. You've been doing more podcasts than I have.
I have way more people listen to the show than watch on YouTube, so I always got to be mindful of that. But we're in the information age. There's no shortage of it. But even with that, information is completely curated. I highly recommend people watch The Creepy Line. It's a documentary about Google. It's on Amazon Prime, which is also hilarious because Amazon's doing a lot of the same stuff Google is. But point is, this information we get is curated, whether it's on social media, any social media platform, whether it's through Google searches or any of this stuff. And we're really not able to see clearly what all that information is, right? We have the ability to look further and thankfully there are phenomenal books. And as you talk to people, which is huge, when you talk to people, not through a keyboard, but face-to-face or on the phone or on FaceTime, you can share things with each other and some of it will resonate. And if there are people in your life, that you learn from, you've been big into mentorship. I don't know who said this. I heard it was Frank Shamrock. I don't know if it came from Frank. It doesn't sound like a Frank Shamrock thing, but he said everyone needs a plus, a minus, and an equal. So a plus is someone you learn from, someone who mentors you. An equal is somebody who you see eye to eye with. Sometimes you teach them, sometimes they teach you, and it's all often it evens out. And then the minus is somebody you mentor. That's somebody who you're teaching, who's apprenticing, or somebody who just wants to learn. And that relationship is generally more give than receive on an information level or a wisdom level. But we need all three in our lives, right? So when you find the person who's a plus or an equal, and they're giving you things of value, investigate further. Dive into the same book or the same documentary that they recommended. Unpack that further so you can come to a greater understanding yourself, and then have the ability to go out and have meaningful conversations with people, which is, largely been lost these days, other than on podcasts and some other long forms of media. The meaningful conversation where we have a dialectic, where I try to understand you better and you try to understand me better. And even if we disagree on things, we come to a place of greater understanding on, I know why you think the way you know, and you know why I think the way that I know or believe to be true. That's awesome. That's important stuff. So I think mentorship is a big one. And if you're not mentored, hand in hand, like there's some great people that I've learned from. I don't know Eckhart Tolle. I didn't know Ram Dass before he passed away. But thanks to their work, to their lectures, to their books, I've come to know them in a way where I've come to learn from them in a way that has helped me immensely in life. And I think as we find ourselves in a place of uncertainty, as we find ourselves in a place of asking more questions, turning to the internet is not the last stop. I can use the internet to purchase a book, but it should be to take a deep dive into something that I want to know more of. It shouldn't start with it could start with a podcast like this, but it shouldn't end there. If I listen to some great thinkers, I'm going to dive in deeper, right? It's not just, don't just give me the cliff notes. Let me understand how you came to understand this. And then from there, I can come to understand it better myself. So there has to be a fire lit under each one of our asses that propels us to understanding the world better and understanding ourselves in turn better. And I think as we begin to have that fire lit, motivation is no longer needed. That is to be inspired to do something, right? If I want to know what makes people tick, I certainly need to learn about it. And I need to learn from some people who resonate with me. And from there, I need to learn from some people who don't resonate with me as well, right? So I can at least see what the opposite side of that argument looks like and understand them better. And all of this takes time, so what you choose to do with your day is really important. If I have a pie chart again, and I go from, the 30 minutes I give myself in the morning to doing work and doing all this other stuff and handling my responsibilities. And then when I finally get a break at night, if I choose to drown myself in entertainment, that's not the same as learning more, right? I've effectively taken that small sliver left in the day and given it to a television program, as opposed to giving it to a documentary or giving it to Audible. And I found, one of the biggest shifts in my life was when Tosh said we should get rid of our TV. We still have an iMac. We still watch documentaries, occasionally watch a Disney flick with the little guy. But for the most part, we're not on our TVs. We haven't on cable in years. I'm not wasting that time on something simply for a laugh. It doesn't mean I don't watch comedies. I'll watch comedies. I'll go to the theater, or I'll watch something. We'll rent something that's cool. It's not to sign off completely on modern society and culture. It's just to say, I hold the knowledge and information that I want to bring in to operate and live in this world better and to enjoy it more, to gain more, to have more compassion, to have more forgiveness. I hold those things more important in the hierarchy of how I spend my time than I do with just drowning myself with entertainment. And I think that fire can be lit too in people, but the baseline barrier to entry and prerequisite for any of this is to have a fire lit under your ass, to want to understand more, to want to grow on the inside. And if you have that, you'll be directed wherever your heart sends you or your gut sends you to the places you need to be. And that track will take corners and turns and U-turns and 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But the point is, when you're on track, you'll know you're on track. And that will lead you to a greater understanding of why we're here in the first place.
So how did two guys that are like 6 foot something, you're taller than I am, that wrestled together, end up in the same career as a pro fighter from a tech world, which, everybody else is going to Harvard and Yale or Stanford and becoming techies and Google and Apple and everything else. How do you think we ended up there? And what was the purpose that you got to beat people up and got beat up for like 10 years for you to be able to see what?
Yeah. Again, this goes back to that extreme conversation. We push ourselves to the extreme to find our center, right? Fighting for me. They said that in Fight Club. It's kind of cliche, but it is really important. How can you ever truly know yourself if you've never been in a fight? Right. I've had several fights where I was in flow. My monkey mind was switched off and I was very successful, under a minute finishes. And I've had fights that went the distance where I was able to, even though the monkey mind would chime in, I could somehow quell it long enough to be able to be a good enough fighter to win the fight. And even though I won, got my ass kicked in the process. And I had to evaluate those fights. And I had fights where I was in such a state of fear and panic that I either got knocked out or I just got beaten the whole time for 15 minutes and had to evaluate those. So all ends of the spectrum. I've been the hammer, I've been the nail. In those experiences, really trying to understand, again, what makes me tick. Why did that fight go that way as opposed to a different way? What was going through my head pre-fight that made me think the way that I was thinking, or to not be able to shut my mind off during the fight? All of this stuff led me to where I am in understanding psychology and what makes people tick further. But again, these just pose questions. They're not giving me necessarily answers. The question leads to more questions, which leads to more answers and more questions. And this is the ever unfolding nature of consciousness, right? There's no finished product. I don't look at myself or you or anybody, even Ram Dass, and be like, that guy did it. He made it. That gal did it. She got to a place where she was just so dialed in. I mean, there are for sure dialed in people, but they themselves would not say they're a finished product. Anybody who's made it that far up the ladder, or however you want to look at that, remembered the true essence of themselves. I like that terminology better than the path of ascension. They don't look at themselves as finished. They're not done. Fighting taught me a lot. It taught you a lot. But one of the reasons we're where we're at today is because we never settled down in terms of what we wanted to learn. We never got to a place of comfort where we said, I'm good here. I don't need him to do anymore, right? It's not and people can get caught in that from a healing perspective, especially with plant medicines. Like, man, I just feel like I have more to heal. And there's still this thing that I fully haven't come to terms with. And it's like, that can be a never ending repetitive loop. That's not the move either, right? It can be a never ending repetitive loop to read every single thing you can get your hands on. Like, I need to know more. I need to know more. The intellect has an appetite that can never be satisfied. And at the same time, we have to balance that paradoxically with, I'm really happy with what I have. I have gratitude for all that I've done. And so there lies the paradox. I'm never going to come to a place where I'm tired of learning, or I think I've learned it all. That's the death. That is stagnant water. And I love that analogy. When you look at a river flowing and there's a little corner where it gets kind of stagnant, what grows there? The gunk starts growing there. Right?
Moss,
the algae, this moss, the other stuff, right? It's not moving water anymore. That's what happens when we figured it all out. We become stagnant. We start to decay. As long as I continue to move with the flow of life, the water stays clear, the water stays clean. Okay. And if I resist any of that, that too isn't good, right? So I got to be able to let go and surrender into all that is, and then move with the flows of life. And with that, that's going to mean I'm going to continue to learn at a pace that's right for me. Most importantly, I'm going to embody the things that I learned. Paul Chek once told me this. He goes, you can read every book on the planet Earth. You just be the smartest guy in the room that doesn't know shit. Well, why is that? Because whether it's plant medicines or a book you read, until you embody those lessons, it's just knowledge. And we have to move from data and information to knowledge to wisdom. And the way we do take knowledge and move it into wisdom is by grounding it into our personal experience. That means if I learn a new way of meditation or a new way of breath work, I actually have to practice that till I have enough equivalency with it that when I speak about it, I'm not just regurgitating someone else's work, but I actually know what it feels like to do those things. I actually know what it feels like to have a visionary experience on breath alone. I know what it feels like to be in a float tank because I've done it hundreds of times. That's why I can recommend that thing, right? And I think these are the things that lead us to greater and greater success because they universally work on the whole system. They have a holistic benefit. And one of the things Paul teaches is that we have to look at things holistically. That's not the way we were educated. We've been educated to be specialists in one particular thing, a software programmer, a mechanic, any of these things that work. But the best mechanics know your whole car inside and out. They're not just the guy that changes transmissions. Right? They might be an expert there, but they still have a global view of what that car looks like and how to fix it. Right? And then how does that integrate further from all right, performance is one lens to look at the body. So how do we gear up? How do we periodize? How do we do all these things to perform better? What does that look like at the end of the